1. Well, hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got the best topic in the world to talk about today. There's few topics that get me jazzed. One of them's employee engagement, and this is the other one. And I am honored to be hanging out with a sales ninja. Now, you might not know what a sales ninja is, so I'm going to fill you in on this because this guy is going to help you sell more deals faster for more money while creating happy customers who generate referrals and 5-star reviews. Now, it can't get any better than that. So I find who this is, and I'm honored to be hanging out with Bob King. How are you today, my friend?
I'm great. Thanks for that wonderful introduction.
Oh my gosh, for sure. You literally wrote the book on closing. It's called The Joy of Closing, the definitive guide to building trust and getting the deal and creating happy customers. So, thank you so much for jumping on today. And I want to know, in your words, what's a sales ninja, just for anyone listening that never heard of that?
Sales ninja, I think it's no one's ever asked me that question, but if I had to define it briefly, I would say it's someone whose intuition and closing skills are so fine-tuned that they are just super comfortable when the customer starts telling lies, which is a very common thing, or offering up objections that they're presenting as conditions, so that you don't panic. You just stick with the intention to
Sure.
do business with them. That what you have is that the best thing for all parties is for them to go forward with you and your company, and you kind of just hang out and let the intimacy develop until that customer finally becomes comfortable enough with you to tell you what's really holding them back. And hopefully by then you built up enough trust that when you speak to it, they
Sure.
respond in the appropriate way, which is, yes, this person has what I'm looking for. This is the change agent that I was searching for when I made that appointment, and I'm going to do this thing that's going to be good for me.
Sure.
Which is what
That's awesome.
salespeople are, change agents, and I would say a
Yeah.
sales ninja is someone who can accomplish that more effectively than the average bear.
Awesome. Well, and I tell you that you had a fine choice of words on your book title because I'm not sure very many people would call the joy of closing. I've heard the pain of closing, the uncomfortable closing, all this because not a lot of sales professionals like to close. And have you done research or figured out why that is? What's your journey shared with you as far as why people have such a hard time closing?
It's why I wrote the book, really. It's taking apart of sales because I think a lot of it has to do with the stigma of what a closer is, the sort of, lone figure walking down a empty street with a briefcase, kind of like the poster for The Exorcist way back when, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And really it's not what closing is. I think also the way literature about closing, I mean, I really wrote my book because I whenever I've been asked to read or tried to read other books about closing, it kind of makes my skin crawl. It's sort of you know, stare at the Porsche you want to buy and or the vacation you want to take your family on, and then use your self-will to run roughshod over the customer. And that's
Yeah.
not my experience. First of all, I don't think that works.
Sure.
Because it's anytime you make it about you,
Yeah.
forget about closing. You're not even going to make a sale, probably. I don't care how many times you go back.
Okay.
Sales, they're buying you, but the sales call is all about them, the customer's needs, their common interests. You're not, you need to really check your ego kind of at the door.
Yeah.
But also really what closing is working with a customer's resistance to get them something they want. And I think when you approach it from that way, it is really a joyful experience. I will say this, you are never tired driving home from a sale. So, and if you don't know that, go out and make a sale and start getting addicted to that drug, and you'll understand what the word joy means.
Yeah.
Because it really is, earning another person's trust is powerful and
Sure.
incredibly exciting. And it's also closing, instead of being this icky thing that somehow a lot of salespeople think it's like kind of icky and somehow beneath them. And
Right.
they are really missing the great thrill of being in sales, which is being that effective change agent and inspiring another person to embrace the change that you're advocating and the
Sure.
sacrifices that come with it. Like really inspiring someone to do that is a very powerful and joyful experience
Love it.
for me, and that
Yeah.
continues to be the case.
Sure, that's awesome. And I think you brought up a great point that I want to make sure we start with is that, there are a lot of people that think that sales is about the salesperson and it's really about the customer, like you said. And it's so crazy that we feel like we have to pressure people into things. And, then it does become all about that salesperson. So in your
Well, but they
career,
oftentimes do need an excuse. They need like a
sure.
financial excuse. That's the other thing is like, we live in this world where, you see all kinds of, anytime you're dealing with a company on a non-personal basis, like
Mhm.
billboards, messaging you get in the mail, TV
Sure.
ads,
Yep.
internet searches. They employ every trick in the book to create urgency, to make you fall in love with the idea of who they are as a company, to um, build on tribal alliances that you might feel as a customer to that company. They
Sure.
do everything that a closer does. And for some reason, salespeople don't always embrace that opportunity. And it doesn't do anyone any good.
Yeah. Oh, well, and it really erodes the trust, like you talked about. So most people won't buy, and that's the interesting thing about this, Bob, is we're consumers as well. So we are on the receiving end of this as well as the giving end, so to speak. So in your career, early in your career, were you the typical salesperson, or did you know this from the start of your journey?
Good question. I came into sales pretty late in life. I was 47 years old, I think, and
Okay.
a little bit before that. And I want to say I failed as a filmmaker. I made a couple of movies and I sold a bunch of scripts, but I never really made money. And then this thing came along called the global economic collapse, and I had to figure out how to pay my rent, basically. And so I took a job selling solar power for a company that was terrible. And one thing about closing is the other thing I wanted to kind of take on as an author is, the best companies at training closers are the worst companies for customers to be in business with a lot of the time. And then, when I wound up anyway, but I stepped into this world where, if I didn't get the sale that day, I was just out gas money and time. And
Yeah.
so I don't know, I met this guy and something about him. I always loved con artist movies as a kid.
Okay.
The Sting, The Lady Eve, The Grifters. I love movies, especially when like the people do the right thing for the wrong reasons or the wrong thing for the right reasons. And I love those kind of characters. And I met one of those kind of characters and he said, "Yeah, you want this thing? Come do it." I had no intention of actually selling any deals for this company, but I wanted to know their secret. And so when I found out the secret, and it was a classic one call close and engage the customer's greed technique.
Sure.
All this is in my book. If you want to hear all the gory details, it's right in here. If you want to know why you bought a timeshare on a day you never thought about timeshares, or a blender at the state fair on a day you never thought about blenders,
Sure.
you will find out. But it basically involves engaging your greed. But you have to make them want it first. So there's a lot that goes into it, but it's really, what a closer does that a salesperson often doesn't is really take the customer on an emotional journey. They're not just like telling you a scope of work and passing a price. They're actually engaging your emotions, moving you from that lizard brain that's afraid of everything
Sure.
into your limbic brain that says, "Yeah, let's do this." And I became I sold a couple of deals, found out they were a horrible company, moved on to a couple of other companies, finally landed somewhere that was a really reputable company where, I was not being asked to engage in any tricks on the customer. And what I found out was that the mindset that I brought into those sales when I closed people was really what was necessary. And so, there's lots of it's a bigger story than that. But
Sure.
the answer to your question is very late in life and by completely the wrong people. But I knew there was something there for me, and it really started a journey that I'm eternally grateful for.
Wow. So you did start in the corporate America, so to speak, and then you
Oh
ended up
no,
in,
I worked for
or you've been
scoundrels, absolute scoundrels, selling stuff for twice as much as we should have. And they don't tell you that when you're training. You don't know you're ripping people off. And so
sure,
you sort of have this enthusiasm. You only know what you were trained to do. You go
sure.
in, you tell them about stuff, you make them want it, you give them this crazy high price, and then, somebody made a mistake and suddenly they're entitled to this discount, but only if they do it today. And
Yeah,
that was what I was trained to do, and I'm not proud of it. And but it's still, customers always need a nudge. When you go online and you search for that hotel room or that plane seat, and it says
yeah,
one left at this price, guess who's buying a hotel room? This is
yeah,
not unique to scoundrels. It's really what corporate America does as well. The only people who don't do it are professional salespeople.
yeah.
So,
Is
and that's just what that customer needs. The other thing is it
sure,
is about the customer. And if what that customer needs is a little financial urgency in order for their limbic brain to win over their lizard brain, I am happy to provide that. You have to be willing to meet the customer where they're at and speak to what their biggest concern is in a way that's powerful and meaningful to them.
sure,
And oftentimes that is a discount or a sale. Every discount, every sale is just a construct to create urgency. None of them are real.
sure.
Yeah, unless the store is really going out of business or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
But that's like by far the exception. How many stores have going out of business sale and you buy your whatever, your cabinet, and 2 years later that sign's still up?
Well, I was curious when you see that today only thing. I mean, aren't people figuring that? I always think it's weird, like a car, where it's like today it's 50 grand today, and tomorrow it's going to be 60 or whatever, right? And it's like, so you're telling me I'll walk in tomorrow with a $50,000 check, you're not going to sell me this at tomorrow? I mean, is that today only thing a pretty legit? I mean, I know like it's legit in your brain. Is it a pretty legit way that a lot of people are doing business?
Well, again, I don't think it's a function of how the business operates. I think it's a function of how the customer's mind operates.
Okay.
And I think a lot of customers just need that nudge. I mean, the company I work for now gives you $300 if you do it today. I don't think that's particularly, on, 50, $60,000 sales.
Right.
That's not
Yeah.
exactly high pressure tactics. It's just,
Correct.
my time costs my company money. And if we can, streamline things a bit, they pass that on to you. That's a
Sure.
perfectly reasonable thing. But I don't think that's necessary. I think the reason for that has far more to do with what will motivate a customer than my company's business model. I mean, that's just, and that's true of virtually every online setting. I mean, they just have to figure out a way to reverse engineer your lizard brain's fear of missing out, which is like, oh my God, don't do this now. What if it gets cheaper? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah,
So at the beginning we talked about sell more deals. So when you think about selling more deals faster and for more money, I want to look at that chunk there.
sure.
I mean, are we talking about like increasing our close rate? Are we talking about accessing more people? For somebody listening somewhere around the world that is in that sales arena every day, are there simple things that you can enact that will help you sell more deals faster and for more money?
Absolutely. I would say in order, uh, number one, do a warm up, like figure out, pay attention to the person that you're engaging with. And find out where you have common ground, pay them a sincere compliment. Just do the basic things that in the business I've been in, you go inside someone's house, they have to invite you in. When you go
Yeah.
inside someone's house, the decent thing to do, if you are, you know a person in the world is to pay them a sincere compliment to their creative expression, usually how their home is
Sure.
decorated. This decent thing to do when they put things up on the wall that signify some allegiance to, a school, a place they like to go on vacation, a project they worked on. If if you can find common ground with the person, people like to do business with people in the same tribe. People
Okay.
trust people who root for the same team. I mean, before we even started this discussion, you and I were talking about the Big Ten and the Pac-8, which, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if I mean, I told you I went to USC, which probably didn't create that allegiance, but if I told you I was rooting for, I don't remember which team you root for, but it's somewhere in Minnesota, I know. But
No, Wisconsin. See, now you even
I don't
swore at
follow
me. Wisconsin. Come on. That's like
football's the
me
one with the funny
saying,
ball that doesn't bounce, right? But it has to be real. The reason I didn't
yeah,
create that bond with you is because I don't follow football, but more importantly, I don't have any, association with Wisconsin, although I did spend a night there once and it was a lot of fun. It was a great night yeah, anyway, that's a long story. But but the so number one, you want to do a warm up, a proper warm up where you pay attention to the customer, not just, what you need to know to define a scope of work, but just who they are as a human being and what's going into them making this decision. And then you need a pitch. I call it a pitch. My favorite is when I coach a lot of, salespeople on closing and a lot of sales teams. And it doesn't really happen with individuals very often, but with teams, a lot of times there will be someone on the team who says, well, I don't have a pitch. I don't pitch, which is crazy.
yeah,
And inevitably they have a pitch that's just really bad. But you need a sales presentation that takes that customer on an emotional journey. And, it really shouldn't vary much between customers. Sure, there's certain things you may find out in discovery that would shift, you're going to talk about something maybe with a little more emphasis based on something you find in discovery. But what you say about your company, what you say about your product, giving the customer a visceral, ideally sensual experience of your product that doesn't involve you talking,
sure.
is a great idea. Um, and then um, and then how you present price. All those things should not vary between customers. That is not the exciting part of sales. You need to be really good at it, and it needs to be pretty much the same every time. And then you get to the most fascinating part of sales, which is closing. And there, I would say, I mean, I did write a whole book about it, but the book's not just about closing. It's really about how to present your product, how to present your company, how to create the optimal conditions to make that customer's limbic brain become engaged and have them say, yeah, let's do this when you ask for the
Gotcha.
deal. So the,
Sure.
the last thing of the basics I would say is when you ask for the deal, whenever you present price, stop talking.
Right.
Because when you do that, two things happen. One is they might say yes, and they can't say yes if you're still talking.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, a lot of times they will tell you what their objection, what's really holding them back. So, but also it's just a generous thing. By that point in a sales presentation, you've been talking for a long time, inevitably.
Yeah.
And if you don't take a moment to pay attention to the customer and figure out what they have to say, they're not going to want to talk. They're going to want to let you keep talking. So you really have to work through that awkwardness, but it's not a pressure thing. It is a pay attention thing. It is actually generous. And the reason customers respond to it positively, even though it gets awkward, is because customers like being paid attention to. And so they may not want to talk at that point, but once they do, and you actually pay attention to what they say, you create an intimacy that that's the first thing that needs to happen for you to build on so that you can create the conditions for them to say yes.
Yeah. Well, there's a ton there. So thank you for unpacking that. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to go through these in detail because I have some questions on these. So we'll be right back. Awesome. Welcome back. Honored to be hanging out with Bob King, the author of The Joy of Closing. What a great word, the joy. Again, thank you for using that word because it shifts our thought process in that and it hopefully alleviates some of that fear that a lot of people have. I want to go back to what you said at the beginning, where you started this process about do the warm up and stuff. How does that? I mean, sometimes I've seen people, Bob, that are kind of forcing it, and they're not really genuine in that connection. They're not really paying that attention. They're trying, but it's not working. Are there some simple things or some universal things that we should be watching as a sales professional, about the person that we're communicating with?
There's an exercise, the first exercise in my book, The Joy of Closing, in the warm-up section is to pay three sincere compliments. One to someone you work with or see every day, one to someone you live with, and one to a complete stranger. And when you start just doing that, a
Okay,
sincere compliment really lifts all boats because when I find something to compliment about you as another human being, it gets me in touch with my gratitude just for the opportunity to get to know another human being and to
sure.
experience someone else. And it just starts everything off on this magical plane of goodwill and connection. And so
Okay.
that would be the first thing is just learn the skill of paying a sincere compliment.
You have to be emotionally intelligent, though. You have to be self-aware. You have to be, I mean, I run into so many people that are so dialed into their presentation, Bob. They're so dialed into walking through what they have to do that they really don't pay attention. I talk about my famous story of buying two camp Toyotas in one day. And I walk in and I say, "Hey, I know the car. I want two of these. We just need to pick out the color. My wife and I are there. We just need to pick out the color. Super easy, right? Shouldn't be long." The guy messed this up so bad. He's like, "Well, let me tell you about the history of Toyota." Okay, didn't listen to me, didn't pay any attention. So I fight my way through that. Let me tell you about the history of the dealership. Another chunk of time I'm never going to get back. And then the third one is let me tell you about my journey in the car dealership. I mean, he must have did that. He's never deviated from that at all. And it's so hard because he did not pay any attention to me. I told
Yeah.
him I want two Camry. I mean, I closed myself. There was like you didn't have to do anything. Do you see a lot of people talking themselves out of these sales?
Let me ask you a question. Did he get the deal or not?
He did, but that's the problem is
Well,
I had to,
then you
I had
can't
to
really.
trade it in a car and it's just, I just need two cars. I don't
Maybe you
care if I,
needed to hear all that stuff, Dave. You don't know. If you walked out, then there's a case to be made.
right?
I think what you're saying is the lack of attention to you is one thing, but I never apologize for doing a company story or talking about the product because you don't know if he hadn't done that stuff, if you would have trusted him, if you would have been as enthusiastic to go forward today. So, I mean, I don't know. I have to challenge you
Sure,
on that story.
sure. That's fine. I'm no, which is fine. I just was like, I told him what I wanted. I'm a high D in disc, so I just results oriented. I want to get it done. I want it. I know what I want. And I'm just curious if you've seen people talk themselves out of sales
Well,
in
if a customer says yes, you need to stop talking and just take out the paperwork, of course. I mean, yeah, it sounds like it was a pretty simple procedure that he almost screwed up, but I don't know.
right?
I think I'm much more encouraging of someone to err on the side of doing a thorough presentation. That's not to say that paying attention to you and your needs is not the highest calling. And
Sure.
if he failed on
Yep.
that, it's a miracle he got the deal
Yeah.
anyway. But more people fail because they don't, you kind of have to go through everything or that when you start skipping stuff, it's amazing how quickly customers will latch on to whatever it is you left out and then
Sure.
make that the reason why they need to quote think about it. That's a pretty
Yeah.
crazy thing. Sales is a
No,
very delicate
that's fair.
souffle.
Well, and I tell you, those are kind of the worst scenarios. Those are probably the worst words from a salesperson is I got to think it over. Those are again, and we'll get to that when we
Well,
get
because
to
it
the
gives you
closing.
nothing to go on. I mean,
Yeah.
if they said, there's a million other things they could say that, oh, I need to talk to the boss, and you can say, well, what do you think she'll say? You know,
Yeah.
and then they start selling themselves, and then by the time you're done responding to that, suddenly they don't need to talk to the boss. Whatever is
Right.
really holding them back comes out. You speak to that, next thing you know, you have a deal. You still have to
Yeah.
ask for it again. You still have to stop talking when you do. But, and you have to not hold the customer to their word that someone else is involved in this decision, which that's just being a decent human being. But there's a lot of things like that. There's way more ways to screw up a sale than there are ways to get one. But
Right.
the fascinating thing about closing is like no two customers are the same. You have to start with the premise, and this will upset a lot of the salespeople in your audience. If you don't start with the premise that there is a way to get any given customer to move forward on any given day, you're multiplying everything in your pitch by zero. And zero times anything is zero. So you
Sure.
really have to start with the idea that today is a great day to go forward, that the best thing for everyone is for us to do this right now.
So is that a mindset shift then for some people, Bob, where we're trying
100%.
to help people?
100%. I've coached
Okay.
so many teams where they never made a one call close. And suddenly it's just a matter of like taking away their business model where they don't give them a price till the second time they call. I mean, literally
Yeah.
that's often the case. And I'm like, well, how many of your customers do you think would go forward if you gave them a price and asked for the deal? And they're always like, oh, none of them. No, no one can make this big a decision. I'm like, well, how about we try it?
Yeah.
And suddenly that becomes, it's not necessarily the norm, but it,
Sure.
it certainly becomes a distinct possibility. It becomes part of their business model. And I will say this, it's always more valuable to get it, you know, in the room. Like for one thing, they made a decision. Like the other difference between closers and salespeople, closers want you to make a decision. Salespeople, for some reason, take some solace in not getting a no. I would
Right.
rather get a no than a I'll think about it.
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah. And
100%
and when
agree.
people are in a slump, my first advice is stop worrying about your closing rate and start worrying about your decision rate. How many of the customers that you met with that you gave all the information needed to make a decision actually made that decision? That's the
Right.
question you should be asking yourself. And if that number's high, your sales rate will take care of itself.
Sure. Oh, so easy to get a pipeline that gets clogged with people that, are just hanging on. They're in the pipeline. You don't want to cross it off. And you can't get them to commit and things like that. So I 100%
Because they're
agree.
not asking. Oftentimes
Yeah,
they are not asking. And
absolutely.
it's funny because a lot of times I work also a lot of times I'll work with a company where like the owner is very successful. They decide they want to expand. They hire a bunch of salespeople. They watch the presentations. They're like, wow, this guy talks about it better than me. Like everyone's going to buy from him. And they can't even come close to the success the owner has. And you
Yeah,
wonder what it is. And it's because the owner has understands who they are as a company, right? It's not, I mean, the sizzle of the product it's exciting, but it's oftentimes not a differentiator between you and every other company that does what you do. So you
sure.
have to talk about your company, and also the owner, owners know why their company was created. They know the niche it was designed to fit. And when they find someone that fits into that niche, that customer gets hooked in. They get hooked in not just to the idea of making this change, but the vision the owner has for the company and being a part of that. And it just becomes this really powerful thing that the first generation of salespeople oftentimes, don't even have an awareness of, let alone the ability to get the customer hooked into that. The other thing is great presenters do not necessarily make great closers. If you
Mhm.
wanted to know like what little magic formula there is for a great closer, it's not someone who has math skills or presentation slickness. It's someone that has the capacity to pay attention to another human being. If you want to train someone to be a closer in your organization, look for that person. That's the kind of person that can turn into a great closer. But I really think most people can like the skill of getting someone to take on your agenda as their idea is a human quality.
Yeah.
The only thing more satisfying than finding what you want and knowing it is helping someone else do that. And we all do this with our kids, with our families, with our loved ones, with our friends. You know, if you've ever picked the next book your book club's reading, or picked the movie on a Saturday night, or gotten your kids to clean their room or their plate,
Mm.
you are a closer. You know, and a lot of times, you know, the default is if you don't do this, I'll do that, right?
Yeah.
That's the worst way to close someone.
Yeah.
You know, you can take inspiration from that and really take on a level of intimacy with your customers that will bring great satisfaction both to you and to the people that you are getting what they want for them. So.
Wow. That's pretty cool. You talked then secondly about this emotional journey that you have to kind of take people on once you do your warm up. How does someone do that, Bob, if they're selling something that's not really sexy, you know, if they're selling paper products, and again, no offense to anybody listening, just things that aren't like, oh my gosh, timeshares or, you know, these things that you can get super emotional about. How do
Right.
you get emotional into something
Because
that
you still work for a
isn't
company that
necessarily
was founded to serve a need. You still
okay?
work for a company that's founded to serve a need. You still work for a company that is either dedicated to customer service or delivering a great price, or in some way you talk about the spiritual element of whatever it is you're doing. But there's a specific technique. I came up with something called the three reasons. It's in the warm up chapter and of my book, The Joy of Closing. And so yeah, the three reasons basically you talk about the three main reasons why other people go forward. And this works for insurance, it works for skincare, it works for solar power, it works for roofs. And by talking about why other people have made the change that you're advocating, it oftentimes can inspire the customer you're sitting across from to want to do the same even before you've asked for the deal.
Gotcha.
And the three reasons are, you know, the first one's always money. There's always a cost saving or expense avoiding element of any purchase. You know, even if it's a luxury good, you can talk about how, you know, the scarcity factor is going to make things more expensive over time or whatever it is.
Sure.
There's always the second part is feels good. And this is what people often ignore. The feel good element, you know, even if you're selling paper, it feels good to know that, you know, you're not going to run out or that you know, your stuff is harvested from, you know, renewable forests or whatever
Sure.
or that no one's going to offer a better price and it's not going to make you look bad to your
Sure.
boss when they see it online for cheaper. But there's always some way to talk about the product in a way that gives the customer a feeling good aspect of it. And
Okay.
then the third thing is urgent. I call urgency. You know, timing. I call it timing, but timing is really just urgency. And so there are always some real world aspect to how doing this now will be either more effective or less expensive or some way rather than doing it later. And, you know, from the world of solar power, you know, it's usually government regulations and things like that. But everyone has supply chain, you know, where issues can always come up. There's always reasons for doing this now. And when you talk about that at the first, you know, at the very beginning of a sales presentation, rather than using some sale or discount to create urgency at the end, it
Sure.
sort of just puts in their mind that doing this now, right now, this is the best time to do this. And you want the customer to feel that way long before you're pressuring them to act that way.
Gotcha. Oh, that's cool. Three reasons others buy. Money feels
Money,
good.
polar bears, and timing. That's what I say. So polar bears is for solar power. But yeah, save money or avoid cost. You know, whatever it is that feels good about the purchase that you're doing. And insurance, it's, you know, security, financial freedom, happy retirement, you know, having taking the lifestyle of your working life into retirement with you instead of having to suddenly scale down. There's always
Sure.
something that feels good about any purchase. And then the
Gotcha.
third thing is timing. Why right
Time.
now is thank God you called me today.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Well, and I think it's really important for somebody listening. if they haven't been able to identify the feels good part that really aligns with that emotional journey that you're talking about,
Hmm.
we, you know, I think I can't remember. People buy emotionally, they make decisions intellectually, right? So they buy on emotion, but their decision making is got to be lined up in that. So I mean that feels good piece I think is really helpful to have that there. So thank you. That's
Well, it
awesome.
comes in a section of the book called Feel the Pain. The
Okay.
first step once you start talking about, once you're into the actual, after the warm up, it's feel the pain. And one thing that closers always do that salespeople often don't is give that customer a stark, painful version of life without their product.
Okay.
You have to make the customer feel the pain of their current situation. You have to shake up the status quo if you want to have the best chance of closing that customer. So, yeah, a lot of times, it's not always pleasant for the customer to be thinking about this stuff, but you are there as a trusted expert. And if you don't establish your expertise by giving them all the information about the decision that they're about to make, you're missing a great opportunity. And part of that is to shake up the status quo and make them feel the pain of their current situation.
Sure. Wow, that's cool. So then the third one you said was to present the price, which again, I think is like most people don't have an issue with that. And it just feels like that becomes the end for most people. That closing piece that you talked about, the fourth one, seems to be kind of it's not there. We get the information. Okay, I'll take a look at it and let you know. I mean, there's like usually a pretty vague ending
So there are
to
two
the
things
sales
missing
process.
from, yeah. So number one, well, first, I mean, the technique I gave was stop talking. You need to just stop talking and pay attention to the customer. But then you need to respond in such a way that actually is about them. That really you have to when they respond, and most of the time they're just going to tell you a lie or give you an objection. That's
Yeah,
most of the time because most customers will not say yes till you've asked four times. And most salespeople give up after two.
mm,
So, you can do that math. So you
yeah,
can't be like stunned when someone says no, or, this sounds great. I just need to talk to the boss, or, awesome. I'm going to call you tomorrow about this. I have a policy. I always sleep on it, or whatever bullshit their lizard brain spits out. You
right.
need
Yep.
to like respond to it. You need to use
Yeah,
it as an opportunity to become more intimate with that customer, but you don't need to take it as gospel or let alone hold them to it later. When a customer
sure.
says yes, like you're not going to say, "Oh, what happened to talking about your wife?" Like you just shut up and,
Yep.
get them to sign the contract. What that requires again is paying attention to the customer. So that's where the warm up pays off because now you have a context in which to pay attention to the customer. You're not just interested in making a sale, you're actually interested in their life, how it's going to work
Sure.
for them, how it will meet their needs, and what you can do to facilitate that as effectively as possible and as personally as possible. Most
Yeah.
people don't want to they're just not, and also all of this is in the context of being committed to the idea that moving forward is the best thing. It's hard to believe if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And if you don't stand for the idea that what you have is a great choice for your customer, you're either working for the wrong company or you're just not really committed to your job. And I
Sure.
would say it's far more the latter than it is. Most companies are designed to fill a need, are well intentioned, and will clean up any messes they make. That's been
Yeah.
or at least those are the ones I've worked with. Thank
Gotcha.
God. But
Yeah.
I tend to work with companies where they're different and better. And the challenge is not, establishing your credibility. It's actually getting the customer to perceive how you're different, why you're better, and usually paying a premium price, not a crazy price, but
Yeah.
not the cheap. We live in a world where anyone can find anything online for cheaper. So if
Yeah.
you're not prepared to sell different and better, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Sure. Wow. Well, and I don't want to bypass what you said because I think it's really interesting that the average person needs to ask for that order 4 times before success happens, but most of us give up after two. So there's a small chunk of sales professionals, the closers, that are crushing it because they know they're going to ask 4 times, and on that fourth time, there's going to be some movement in one direction or the other. I mean, if somebody says no in your world, I mean, I can't do it, not interested, whatever it is, it's
Oh,
a
that's
no.
easy. They don't say that though. When it's all
Okay.
that they throw up, they're either a lie. They're most of the time it's it sounds like I'm very provocative in my language, but it really is a lie. Think about the last time you went into a store and didn't buy something.
Right.
And they said, can I help you? You probably did not tell them the truth. You probably
Right.
did not say,
Just
you know what,
looking.
you're over, huh?
I'm just looking, right? When you say that, that's not that you're already
Just
starting
looking
off.
is always a lie. You walked in for a
Right.
reason. There either something caught your eye or you have a need that needs to be filled.
Right.
And
Yep.
yeah, just looking is always a lie, pretty much. And sometimes it's a lie. Most of the time, I think it's a lie the customer tells themselves too. It's not just, but it's basically they're avoiding intimacy. And if you're not like the one pursuing intimacy, then everyone's just avoiding everyone. But why are
Yeah.
you there? That's the question.
Yeah.
So assuming that you're there with a purpose, that you think you have something valuable that will benefit your customer, and you are, committed to working with their resistance to getting them something they want, then how you do that is really fascinating. It really takes the Groundhog Day out of sales because anybody can, type up an order or punch numbers into a cash register and, whatever,
Yeah.
run a credit card slip. But people who really pay attention to other human beings have a much more interesting, fascinating life, a much more joyful existence. And, you know, there's that old saying that 20% of the salespeople do 80% of the business. Well, I wanted to write a book to tell the 80% what the 20% never will, which is how to work with that customer's resistance and get them something they want.
There. Oh, that's cool. Well, and again, we want people to pick up the joy of closing the book. So, do we grab it at on your website? Do we grab it
They
at
can grab it on
Amazon?
the website. Amazon's really the best place. Although I do have a special if you have a bunch of employees. If you buy 20 books, I give you an hour of my time. And if you think you don't have 20 salespeople, I would just say anyone who interacts with customers has the opportunity to be a closer. And I'm sure
Sure.
in any organization, there are people in your customer service team that every time they talk to a customer, you're about to get a 5-star. Well, you have to close people on 5-star reviews, but you have the opportunity to get a 5-star review or deliver a great customer experience. And there are people on your operations team that you're like, no, no, don't let them talk to customers.
Yeah,
All those
right.
people
Yeah,
should read my book as well, because
sure.
anyone who talks to a customer is either closing them on, that's not my job, or, uh, I made a great decision and I'm so glad we decided to do this. So,
Sure.
so everyone who talks to customers on your team has the potential to be a closer, and the ones that aren't might be doing more damage than those deals you didn't get.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So if you got 20, and the other thing is if you got 20 customers, you can give them out to customers as a gift as well. So I think
And why
it's
not? Value added.
right, exactly. So, a couple questions. I'm going to let you go, Bob. As we start to land the plane today, what would your tip of the day be for somebody listening? Maybe it's something we covered already. Maybe it's something that we haven't. But what would your tip of the day be today?
Uh, my tip of the day would be to step into a greater expression of your ability to create change and inspire others by learning how to pay attention to your customer, build trust, and get them what they want. They didn't make the appointment to hear about what you're telling them so they could go home and feel more confused. They made the appointment because you had something that they were interested in. And, I'm not saying, look, part of closing is sometimes recognizing that what you have isn't right for that customer, and that's great too. But a closer is far more likely to come to that conclusion than a salesperson. that there's a
Sure.
huge distinction between salespeople and closers. And closer is not a dirty word for someone who uses their self-will to convince someone of something that isn't true. A closer is someone who is willing to pay attention to that other human being and get
Sure.
them what they want, even though it's hard.
Well, and those are probably some of the strongest 5 words for a business. Pay attention to your customer, pay attention to your prospect, whichever works best for you. So I'm hoping that somebody listening right now is like, man, that's like really smart. I wish I would have did that. I'm going to start doing that today. Um, Bob, if somebody is listening and they want to connect with you, they want to learn more about what you're talking about, what your the training that you offer, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Just send an email through the website, bob@joyofclosing.com. My actually, I'm launching something probably next week on the website. It's a quiz. Are you a closer or a poser? So by the
Oh,
time this thing posts, just come on
yeah.
my website and I will diagnose you as a closer or a poser, or there's like a bunch of different, you could wind up and I will send you a chapter from the audiobook that applies to whatever stage that you're in that will offer you the most
That's
opportunity to
cool.
improve. So
So go to
free stuff.
joyofclosing.com
Just
and
joyofclosing.com. Yeah.
joyofclosing.com and
Take the closer
definitely
quiz. Find
take the
out where you find out where
closer
you're
or a
at.
poser. That's pretty cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for unpacking this. What a great thought to be able to actually sell more deals faster, to be able to actually make more money while you're creating happy customers because you focused on them. And I can't overemphasize that. That's my takeaway today is to really focus on that customer rather than focus on your process or focus on the outcome. If you really focus on them, great things are going to happen. So I appreciate Bob hanging out. First time I've ever hung out with a sales ninja. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us. And I don't have anything to say about USC and the Big Ten, and you don't seem to be caring about it. So but we used to have this little group of colleges in the Midwest, and they were the Big Ten. Now it's like the Big 20. So I don't know. I don't get it, but thank you.
Congratulations on your success in the
Yeah,
field of college.
yeah, exactly. Hey, Wisconsin, we do all right on some things. So, but
Oh,
thank you again
Wisconsin's a
for
fantastic state. I had the best time there. It was super fun. Yeah, it
yeah.
was,
Well, one day, I mean, boy, you must either hit it right or
it was a
they
couple of
ask you not to
days. It was
come
a couple
back.
of days.
So,
It's a long. I was driving across country. I had my dog. I ran into a friend of mine who I didn't even know lived there. Spent the night with his parents before his
wow,
mom left the family. It was a fun. It was a fun. It was a fun
cool.
time.
Well, good, good,
Yeah.
good, good. Well,
But
thank
really
you
nice
again.
people. Really, always very nice people from Wisconsin. So
Awesome.
I
Thank you.
appreciate your
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for
kindness.
sharing parts of your book. And if people want to go to joyofclosing.com, they can pick up a copy of the book. They can get a poser or closer assessment, and then they'll get a free chapter of the book based on what their answers were. So, again, thank you for all this and can't wait to keep learning from you.
Thanks, Dave.